Good afternoon. This is the regular board meeting of September 15, 2022. The time is 4:05 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Herrera,
Here.
Vice President Chavez,
Here.
Clerk Cortese,
Here.
Member Lay,
Here.
Member Doe.
Here.
Again, welcome to this board meeting of September 15, 2022. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide comment to the board on a closed session agenda item at this time?
We have no online or in-person public comment.
Seeing none, hearing none, the board will now recess to closed session, and we'll return around 6 p.m. Thank you. Welcome to the board meeting of September 15, 2022. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome. Members of the public, you can submit your public comment as follows. You may raise your virtual hand in Zoom to request to speak and offer comment in real time. In-person public commentators will be allowed entry, 3 speakers at a time in the boardroom. Upon conclusion of a speaker's public comment on the agenda item, the speaker must exit the boardroom. You may also submit your public comment online by accessing the form on the district's homepage at ESUHSD.org or the link on the agenda. Please reference the agenda item number or written comment and limit your written comments to no more than 1,000 characters in length. Public comment submitted online will be read into the record. Please note that all meetings are recorded. All regular and special meetings of the Board of Trustees and board study sessions are streamed live on meeting nights and are also available for viewing the day after the meeting by accessing the district's YouTube channel listed on the district's webpage at ESUHSD.org under the Quick Links section. The board is not able to respond to items that are not on the agenda or to any personnel issues. Your comment will be read into the record and will be directed to the superintendent and/or the appropriate staff member for response. Interpretation of this meeting in Spanish and Vietnamese can be heard by accessing the link and following the instructions shown on the agenda or the district's website. Again, welcome, and we're going to proceed with our agenda under section 5, adoption of the agenda, which is an opportunity for the administration or the board to request a change in the published agenda. Hearing none, seeing none, proceeding to item 6, board special recognitions. There are no scheduled recognitions this evening. Item 7, student board liaison, and we still do not have a student governing board representative. So no report in that area today. Number 8 on the agenda, special order of business, operational items, board discussion and/or action. 8.01 is an opportunity to ask for anything to be heard out of order from the published agenda, but since there's only one item, we're going to proceed to 8.02, which is presentation, discussion, and/or action to accept the unaudited actuals financial report for the fiscal year 2021-22 and our new associate superintendent, Michelle, how do you pronounce your last name? Hunton? Oh, I got it fairly close. Huntoon. And nevertheless, for the record, state your name, make sure your microphone is on. Thank you.
Good evening, Michelle Huntoon, Associate Superintendent for Eastside Union High School District. Good evening. Thank you. And oh yes, beautiful. Thank you. We have a PowerPoint presentation that we'll be doing this evening. So President Herrera and Superintendent Vanderzee and members of the board, thank you so much for this opportunity to present the unaudited actuals this evening. And so we're going to start out with, and first of all, I want to say thank you so much to the staff. They've worked so diligently and so hard to close up the year, the fiscal year for 2021-22. And I believe, yes, she's here. Miss Sylvia is here. Thank you so much. So as we look at our vision and mission, I see the vision and mission through the lens of our equitable communities as we are ensuring that our scholars are going to be successful. And so we are moving on to our next. So much. So as we look at the budget cycle and we look at 1 year, we actually are working in 3 different years. And so as we look at this, we are here at the 21-22 annual financial report. But if you see, we start out in August of 2022 and we go for a full year. There's colors in there. So the green is our current year. I'll make it really simple. The purple is last year and the yellow is next year. And so you can see that all of those colors are in fact at some point during the year included within the fiscal year. And so the checks are those items that we have completed thus far. You will see this again on December 8th when we come back as it relates to the budget. Thank you. So what are the unaudited actuals? So it's really looking at a year's long between July 1st and June 30th for a school agency. It's the transactions. It's all of their financial transactions for revenues and expenditures for that fiscal year. And so we're putting it into something called an unaudited report. And until our auditors come in, our annual auditors, they're outside third-party vendors that come in and actually do audit our financial statements, all of those transactions that we've completed for the 21-22 year. So we have a deadline for that as well. You will see what I like to call it the audit. I like to call it the report card. And you will see that in January. And we must also submit that to our oversight agency, which is the Santa Clara County Office of Education. So let's take a moment and look at the estimated actuals versus the unaudited actuals. So the last time that you saw estimated actuals was during the budget adoption. You saw that there, it was a projection. Where did we estimate that we were going to end for the year? So as we look at the revenues, there was a total variance of 8 million to the good. So that was a positive. And what made up that 8 million? It was 2 A to G grants. Those were not known until June when we received that information, received those funds, and also the effective educator. So there were 3 grants that came in June. And so that made up almost the totality of that 8 million. And then we're going to look next to our expenditures.
At some point, my computer will do it.
It froze. Okay, that's okay. So, and I do believe that you have the PowerPoint as well. Okay, I'm going to try to do this from memory. And so as we look at our total variance for expenditures, it is 1.7. Now that is a reduction. So that's a decrease in our expenditures of 1.7. So that's over what we had anticipated that we were going to spend. We spent less than we had anticipated. And that was made up. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Can I have a quick question?
Yes, 1.7 million. Is that
Okay.
Yes.
For
Yes.
the 8 million variance,
Mhm.
for those funding, those grant, we cannot use for anything else except for those category, right?
Excellent point. You're absolutely correct. Those are restricted funds. And in fact, I do believe, and Superintendent Vanderzee can correct me if I'm wrong, that you did have a presentation on the grant plan, I think, on all of those grants.
Yes, for each of these grants, you'll remember that Ed Services came forward and Associate Superintendent Marquez laid out a 3-year plan of additional services and trainings for helping students meet the A through G requirement and supports for educators. And so while those monies were anticipated, because they were unknown dollar requirements from the state, we developed a plan for it, but weren't able to actually put it into the budget until we got it in June. And that's why there's this, it appears to be a variance, even though there's a plan for it going forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Great question. So as we look at the expenditures, there was a reduction of 1.7 million, and that was made up of savings on unfilled positions. It was also an increase in books and supplies, as well as an decrease in our contracted services. Thank you. And when we look at those contracted services, primarily it was in the area of special education, for transportation, and our MPS or non-public school. And so that was the decrease that we were seeing there. So that's what primarily made up, largely made up that $1.7 million reduction over what we had anticipated in spending. Okay, the next. Nope, it's okay.
As we move that, is the 1.7 part of the 8 million?
Nope, and hold on one second, because I've got a chart that hopefully will kind of go through what that was, what happened. Yes, yeah, and also the impact to the ending balance, how that works out.
So while we're waiting
Yes.
for decreasing in contract, so could you name some of them, or do you have some, contracted name services?
So I don't have names. I just know those areas that
Some of those decrease in services, that's in this moment in time.
yes.
So if we're invoiced later by students that are in a non-public school and they've yet to invoice us, or with our SELPA, that could be something that it's in those savings. That's up to this moment in time.
Yeah, it's pretty, well, it's often typical for the invoices for those types of services to come in after the fact. So, yeah. So here's the chart that I mentioned. And so first we see that the first column of numbers is our 21-22. That was the estimated actuals that you saw at budget adoption. And then we have our 21-22 unaudited actuals. So that's what has been updated. So you can see the differences. If you go across, I kind of put a box there so that we can see we're going down to determine what our ending fund balance is in each of those periods. But now that we are at the unaudited actuals and we're looking at actuals or estimated actuals versus unaudited actuals, there's a box there. So when we looked at the total revenues that we're looking across now, the differences between what we had estimated versus the actuals. And so that's where our 8 million came into play. So when we have more, an increase in revenue, it's going to be an increase in our ending balance. It's really important also to note here that we have both restricted and unrestricted revenues and expenditures in these numbers. And then if we look at our next row of total expenditures, again, looking across, that shows us where we had a reduction of 1.7 million. When you have a reduction in your expenditures, that's going to actually be a positive to your ending balance. So we take our 8 million plus our 1.7 million gets us to that 9.7 million. So that kind of shows you where that's coming from. Does that help? Okay, so we have also, we're demonstrating here this evening as well, is that the impact to on your most recent budget revision, which was your 45-day you got from Mr. Wheelahand in August. So we had good news and we are happy about that. So the next time that you will see an update regarding the budget will be on December 8th. And we will take a look at that 3-year view that we are required current year and 2 out years. So on December 8th, you will see the first interim report. And between now and then, there will be much to do. And then in January, we get our report card, which is the presentation of your financial audit will come in January. Also in January, we start looking ahead for 23-24. that's when the governor's January budget comes out. That's the first look from the administration, the state administration. Okay, so with that, that wraps up our unaudited actuals. Do we have any questions this evening?
For the board, comments, questions, and if not, a motion for approval.
Second.
I make a comment. I just want to appreciate the simplicity, high level, the color coding. It makes it easy for me to like mentally process. I'm like, oh, I never thought about it this way. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And I'm always looking for feedback if we can do something different. to
Thank
make
you
it
for the
easier.
first presentation. It's very clear. That is very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
So motion to approve by trustee Doe, seconded by trustee Cortese. There's no further discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, abstentions, and it passes unanimously.
That, we passed the motion, and I just want to say again, thank you to the team. Because we talked about this notion of the late arrival of those $6 million and those grant those grant funds. And prior to that, there was less than 1% variance between what was previously budgeted and what these now unaudited, the estimated actuals, and now the unaudited actuals, which means the team is doing a really good job of budgeting and finding ways to keep us providing as much service as we can and much program as we can with the dollars that we receive. And so I'm really appreciative of the team of going through it again and again and again and finding ways for us that when we keep asking for things, we can say yes.
She's very
And
diligent,
did a
very
great job. So
conscientious.
thank you very
I
much.
appreciate that. Yeah. And we were within 1% of the variance also on the expenditures.
Very good. Congratulations on your maiden presentation to the board. Okay. Moving on to item 9 on the agenda, and there are no public hearings scheduled. Moving on to item 10, public members who wish to address the board. Do we have any comments under public members who wish to address?
We do have written comment. Are there any yellow forms requesting to speak on this item?
Oh. Let me call up CSEA President Julio Pardo. And, being a bargaining unit, representing a bargaining unit, he has up to 5 minutes to address the board.
I apologize for my phone. I forgot to turn it off. Julio Pardo, CSA President, Chapter 187. I missed the first couple of meetings you guys had this year because of some personal issues. And I'm lucky to be here for this one, to tell you the truth. I just wanted to, first of all, welcome you all to a new school year, which I haven't had a chance to do yet. And I have to say that the freshman class this year is so much better than last year. I'm just wondering how much being away from COVID has helped that issue. But we still do have some issues on campuses. And I'm hoping that we can work that ESTA also, along with us, would like to work with administration to try to resolve these issues. Now, a lot of it has to do with safety. A lot of it has to do with safety on the campuses. And so we're hoping that we can eventually get together and take care of this. One other thing I'd like to say is that it's nice to have an entire administration team. We, as I said before, with Mr. Nguyen, I've been working with him and we've done pretty well together. And I'm holding out with Ms. Huntoon, I hope I said that correctly. That I just met with her and I think we can work very well together. We do have some issues. I'm hoping that we can resolve all of them. I'm hoping that if I have to come to the board, that I will be heard and listened to. And that, wow. I'm going to repeat one thing that Mr. Vanderzee said. Now, since there seems to be so much more, that if we come asking for stuff, that maybe the board can say yes to that also. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pardo. Any other public comments?
We have one written public comment. This comment comes from Jermaine Hopkins, community member. The ESUHSD is currently billing the district for filling or refusing to comply with the California Public Records Act and or responding to public records requests with fraudulent misrepresentations of law and fact, while also billing for these unlawful services, including violating the CPRA on, W, how, O, the, of the district. Also, employee and her husband are the recipients of professional legal services in whether ESUHSD characterizes in order to fraudulently withhold public records that are evidence of criminal conduct and district policy violations, to be a personal dispute in an effort to conceal the fraud in which both he and his firm, Rehan and Roberts APC, are engaging. Lisa Roberts and Paul Rehan are aware, and therefore their firms should be terminated by the board. We'll note that the names of a district employee and an employee's family have been redacted for privacy and safety concerns.
Thank you. That concludes the reading of that comment. Is there any other comment?
There's no further public comment.
Very much. We're going to proceed then to item 11 on the agenda. Operational items, board discussion and or action. 11.01 on regarding the update on novel coronavirus. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you very much. As is our custom, to make sure that our community is aware of how we are continuing to work as community in responding to the virus, we'll have the updates of data. Also, there are some changes in some state requirements that will make people aware of, and then also just to reiterate our field trip current practices as people are starting to think out events throughout the school year. So last time we were together, we looked at the total cases cumulative and the 7-day rolling average. At that point, we were at 405 a day. In the last 7 days, we've dropped to 255. So a significant drop within our county during the last 2 weeks even. Once again, this is not a 7-day rolling average. This is cumulative. This is deaths that have been attributed to COVID. You'll see that the rate down here at the bottom right continues to decline. Last time we were here, it was 2,445. And the number has gone up only to 457, which is one of the smallest incremental growths that we've seen since starting these presentations. And you can see that the death rate here attributed to COVID has declined significantly. This is the one we like to see. Please make sure that you find a way to vaccinate and get your booster. Last time we saw that we were about 580 or 1,676,580 with percentages about 87 and then 69% for the booster dosage. That number has gone up and our percentages is kind of start to vary between how long someone gets vaccinated and a booster, but the booster percentage held at 69% this time. So thanks to everybody in the community who is making sure that they provide the access to vaccination and for our community for taking advantage. This is interesting. The last time we were together, our positive cases for staff was 20. Our positive cases for students was 51. This is a 10-day total count. It's not an average per day. This is a 10-day count. And so sometimes someone will test positive, be asymptomatic, pass that test and be back in even within those 10 days. But this is across those past 10 days previously. The number went down for staff in this last to 13 and ticked up a bit with students to 82. Our percentages are still very low in terms of positive cases per total number of students. And we can see in adult ed that the numbers remained at 0 and 0. Our ongoing safety measures, we make the testing free and available. We distribute the PPE and the personal protective equipment. We continue to encourage symptomatic individuals test and follow the isolation guidelines, please. The new notification is if we have more than 5% of the site's total population test positive over a 10-day period, we need to report that. We have not come close to that at any of our sites, and I should probably start knocking on things when I say things like that. Thank you. We'll continue to maintain proper ventilation and air filtration, and I just want to thank really our whole community in dealing with the heat and the strain in our system and people dealing with, keeping the air flowing during the COVID time and also dealing with the heat. People did a really good job as a whole. And I want to thank our staff for keeping it up, and then our teachers and our students for, hey, dealing with it and continuing to move forward. Awesome. Again, we encourage individuals to vaccinate, and there's the link here that you can see COVID vaccination opportunities within our county. And for people that are feeling some kind of way or feeling like they need to talk to somebody as we go through this experience together, there's always this online referral system. But what I do want to make sure that our entire organization is aware of as a whole, Governor Newsom did repeal the requirement for school employee vaccination effective September 17. So that's essentially through the end of this week, to the end of this week. Our vaccination rate was in the high 80s previously, and it kind of stayed there and grew incrementally higher. But right now we can see that there will be a change in the requirements. The field trip process will start the same. I've had a few inquiries on this. If it's overnight, we go to places that have equal or lower rates, and we test before and after before returning to a classroom. If it's out of state, then we test before, after, and then 3 days after our return. Our next steps are do what we've been doing, is continue to make testing available for staff and students. We'll continue. We don't have a problem locating PPE. We've got masks. We'll be okay there. In recent years, we've learned that fire is kind of a recurring reality for us Californians. So we're going to keep those masks on in our area in case we have to deal with issues dealing with smoke in the future. But we've got masks and tests available for everybody. And then consistent, like sometimes the guidelines go up in terms of restrictions. In this case, with the repealing the requirement for school employees to be vaccinated, there's been another change, and we'll just continue to monitor that and make decisions that's best for our community. So that's our update for presentation. The action that we do need to take as a board is to extend our ability to conduct teleconferences via the Brown Act through October 17th.
Approved. Second.
By Cortese, seconded by Chavez. And this is a motion to say again to authorize remote teleconferencing meetings through October 17, 2022. If there is no further if there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it passes unanimously. 11.02 regarding proposed amendments to the 2022-2023 board meeting calendar. Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, this is asking you to take action to adopt it. This moves the October 8 board retreat. It says that we won't be holding it then. It does stay as a to be determined. We have a board retreat scheduled for January. We were pulled the board and we're not able to get a date that everyone could attend for early November or in December. So we'll hold the January event, and then we'll pull the group to see if we do something similar to last year when we met then in the spring as well.
Do we need an action on this?
Yes, just to receive this adopted proposal.
Well,
We're augmenting our board calendars.
okay,
Pulling
which is
retreats.
eliminating the October date for the board retreat. And,
Correct. And then we'll pull the board for when we have a January date already established, and then we'll pull the board for a spring date for us to meet a second
Who
time. during
moved
the
and who seconded?
Second.
It was moved by Von Lay and seconded by Patty Cortese. Okay.
I didn't second.
You didn't second? Well, seconded by Chavez. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, and passes unanimously. 11.03 regarding senior manager of internal audit, first reading of the draft annual audit work plan. Coming to the podium is senior manager of internal audit, Kelly Kwong. Please state your name for the record and make sure the microphone's on.
Kelly Kwong, Senior Manager of Internal Audit. Dear Board, I present to you the first reading of the annual audit work plan for discussion and input.
it will be brought to the audit committee for further discussion. Thereafter, it will be brought back to the board for final adoption in November.
Okay, we have it for the record before the full board, and the follow-up will be with the committee chair and vice chair and the committee's work itself. Members of the board, any comments or questions?
I just want to speak to Kelly and your diligence and how hard you work. And this is composed of there's so much behind this. And just the work that you have done has been nothing short of impressive. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge that and just thank you for all your work and making sure that we're in the right track with our monies.
Good. There are no
Yeah,
other-
I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you, Kelly, to talk about this. So, you know, we already talked through all my thoughts, and that was, I appreciate the opportunity to connect, even though I'm not on the audit committee. So that. Thanks for making it.
Thank you for our one-on-one time.
All right. Did you want to say something, Mr. Dean?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate your work and the time you put in to meet with all of us board members. We will hope that all board members are aware and be familiar with the process of your work.
I'd like to say a few words that I know since Kelly Wang took over the position, there's a lot of progress, and I continue to work with your department and make sure that everything is working out in the right place. And we will have one-on-one probably next week. Thank you.
Again, thank you. Moving on to section 12, educational services / student services, item 12.01, regarding English language learner program, Ms. Martha Guerrero, Director of Instruction.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Vander Zee. My name is Martha Guerrero, and I'm the Director of Instructional Services. And I'm here to give you an update on a presentation that I made about a year ago, last October. At that time, I shared with you that we would be engaging in a review of our EL program. It's been a year, so I'm coming to you with some of the recommendations and some of the findings of that report. So the first few slides in the presentation, you see every time that Ed Services presents. They are our anchoring beliefs, statements, and promises we have made to the community that we serve. But for today's presentation, I'm going to ask you that you indulge me a little bit in that we look at the slides with our English learners in mind. When we talk about building equitable communities, we talk about welcoming all students as they are, but our students are not an all. They are not a homogeneous group. They are made up of students with different needs, with different strengths, with different assets, with different supports needs. And so for today, as you look at the same slides you see during every presentation, if we could look at our equitable community statement and think about, are we welcoming all English learners as they are? Are we getting to know their strengths and their areas of growth? Do we respond positively to our English learners so that they in turn can engage in the tasks that teachers prepare for them in their English, their science, their math classes? We approach our work in Ed Services every time that we see an issue, not as an individual issue, but as a way to improve our district. We try to put together a system response, and that is made up of reviewing of our board policies. Do we have the board policies that guide our work? Are they guided by Ed Code? Is it federal law? And then what are the practices that we have in place? What are the procedures we have created to either open access to opportunities in our district for these students or for all students? And what are the barriers that we sometimes inadvertently create when we're trying to do something on behalf and for our students? So as we look at this slide, which you saw during the LCAP presentation at the last board meeting, we have made a promise to our students. And if we're looking at all the students, the question is, are our EL students graduating prepared for college and career? As we work towards the implementation of MTSS, as we work towards addressing the whole child, their academic needs, their behavioral wellness needs, their social emotional needs, are we doing that for our English learners? And are they graduating with the skills that we have outlined in our graduate profile? Are they graduating as collaborators, as communicators? Are they graduating as critical thinkers, as creators, as community members? And are they graduating with a plan for what comes after high school? And after spending 4 years with us, or 3 years, or 2 years, are they graduating ready to make that promise, that Spartan promise that we make to all our students? Are they ready to go to a university and make that promise a reality? And the reason I have asked that you indulge me in looking at the slides that you always see with the lens of our English learners is because sometimes when we make presentations to the board around data, we look at data that is not equitable, data that doesn't have the same results and outcomes among our different groups. And so it's very easy to say, well, it's because they are students with disabilities. It's because they are English learners. It's because they're homeless students. It's because. And so our equity policy, the policy that you passed, reminds us that we have made a commitment that regardless of the student's background, language proficiency, race, disability, gender, that it is ultimately our responsibility as a system to ensure that they have access to the same promise that we make all our students. So last October 7th of 2021, I was here to talk to you about our system response to the needs of our English learners. That as a district in educational services, we engage in a cycle of inquiry around those 3 areas that you see on this slide. Anytime there is an issue we need to discuss or resolve, we look at our policies. What does our policy tells us? What are our practices? What are our procedures? And finally, what are our access or barrier points? So for our English learners, we engaged in a similar process. At that time, a year ago, I shared with you the different policies that guide our work with our English learners. And at the end of that review of policy, the conclusion is that our LCAP, our board policies are aligned with the state of California, California English Learner Roadmap that outlines the work that we should do with our English learners. And it's also aligned with the federal government requirements under Title III. And that is that our mandate is from the federal government, from the state government, and outlined in our board policies that we are supposed to prepare our English learners to become English proficient, not just be English learners, but become fluent English proficient. That our mandate is to ensure that they attain grade level standards as any other student, and that we take advantage of the asset that they bring by being bilingual or trilingual, that we have opportunities to develop their proficiency in multiple languages. So based on that cycle of inquiry, we were able to see a year ago that we do have the policies in place, and that maybe what we needed to look at were our practices. We looked at demographics a year ago. These are old, this is old data because it was from a year ago, but just to kind of anchor our work a little bit as to who we're talking about today, that we have roughly about 16% of our students are English learners. I think Kirsten King gave me the latest numbers, and there are about 4,000 students this year so far who are English learners. So for a school district of about 22,000, we're talking closer to about 18% of our students are English learners. That means that they have not yet been redesignated as English proficient. A short-term English learner is somebody who is a newcomer to our country, who is learning English as a second language and has been in our country or learning English in our school system for 5 years or fewer. And a long-term English learner is somebody who was tested for English learner for over 6 years or more. So they could be students who come from another country, but they could also be students who were born and raised here, but because they speak another language are tested and then are not considered English proficient. So the majority of our students are long-term English learners, and about 40% of them are short-term English learners. We actually have the number of newcomer students who have arrived has been increasing in this school year. We seem to have an increase of students coming from Central America and also from some Eastern European countries. Back then, after we looked at demographics, we looked at data, and I showed you charts that Kirsten King had prepared. I've summarized those charts because today I want to go over the recommendations after the study. But basically, we learned back then that in our graduation rate, we have an overall graduation rate of about 86%. Whereas if you are an English learner and we look at the graduation rate of only our English learners, the graduation rate for them is about 73%, 72%. We also looked at data of students who start on the first day of high school with us and stay at the same school for 4 years. Those are students we consider cohort students. If they, our overall data for cohort students is 95%, almost 96% graduation rate. But if they happen to be English learners and the graduation rate drops to about 86%. As for students who are non-cohort students, those students who start in one of our high schools after the first day and who move in and out of schools or move in and out of the state or district or country, we have an overall graduation rate of about 71%, but for our English learners, that graduation rate drops to about 58%. So as we talk about building equitable communities, there are some inequitable results when it comes to our English language learner students. We also looked a year ago at the A through G completion data. A through G completion data is based on the 15 courses, the 15 college prep courses that students have to pass in order to be eligible for university admission. We looked at our overall A through G completion rate district-wide, and this is 1920 data, so the data has changed. At that time, it was 52.8%, but among English learners, our A through G completion data was 22%. And then if we disaggregate a little bit more and look at the kids who start and end at the same school from day one till 4 years later, our overall graduation rate was 61%, 62%, whereas that same group of students who start with us and end with us 4 years in the same school 4 years later, the A through G completion rate was 19%. For the non-cohort students, those who move in and out of schools, don't start on the first day, come from another state, another district, another country, the overall A through G completion rate was 25%, but if they're English learners, then it's about 12%. So part of the presentation a year ago was we have the policies in place that guide our work. We know what our mandate is, but our outcomes are not equitable. So then we need to look a little deeper and find out, is it practices? Is it procedures? Is it access points we have created or not? And have we created some barriers without knowing about it? We had lots of questions as Ed Services that needed an answer. And for that reason, next slide, we partnered with West Ed. And West Ed is a local research-based nonprofit that supports school districts and schools in research, in inquiry, and improvement in the improvement cycle. This was a review and a study in which all of the different departments in Ed Services participated. All the directors were part of it, so that we could look a little deeper at our data and our practices to find out what is it that's causing this inequitable outcomes. In total, we had, besides the directors, we had a team of 14 staff members who participated in the study for second semester of last school year. We had teachers, ELD department chairs, teachers who work with our newcomer students. We had our subject area coordinators. We had teachers on special assignment. We had some associate principals who joined, as well as district administration. It was the district team that chose the 4 schools that were the focus of the study. We chose those 4 schools because they represented other schools. So Andrew Hill High School has a large percentage of English learners, Vietnamese and Spanish speaking, and they represented those schools that have a full-blown ELD program, like Mount Pleasant, like Independence. We chose Foothill High School because it's a continuation high school. They have English learners, just like Pegasus and Apollo and Phoenix. So what is happening? What services do we provide our ELs in our continuation high schools? Independence is a hub. And then James Lake High School represented those schools that have English learners, but do not have an ELD program, may or may not have sheltered courses, schools for whom there are no specific programs for EL students necessarily. And, oh, I'm sorry, so the work of that team, that district team, and of the consultants from West Ed was to conduct a series of classroom observations in those 4 schools. We also shadowed students from class to class, and West Ed conducted parent focus groups at each of those 4 high schools. They also conducted student and staff focus groups. So it was a busy time for everybody, especially those schools, because they had to coordinate all the different focus groups. On top of that, there were a series of one-to-one interviews. West Ed, part of the study was to review some documentation, what kind of documents we had. We were lacking documents in some areas. We did not have processes written down in others, and therefore they needed to interview staff one-on-one. This was not part of the original plan, but they had to engage in that. We needed to interview Andrew Hill and Overfeld staff because those 2 schools have taken it upon themselves, some initiative to try and create academy-type small learning communities for their newcomer students on their own, not as part of a district initiative. So we needed to learn what they were doing to support our newcomers. We had our subject area coordinators, back to the same slide. The teachers on special assignment, that whole group required interviews. And our director of special education was interviewed because we needed to find out, how do we support the needs of our students with disabilities who are also English learners? And then the last thing was the review of our curricula and instructional materials, in particular, our textbooks. What kind of textbooks are we using? What type of instructional materials are we supplying our teachers and our students? We received the report in June, just about the right time that the board cycle was ending, the board meeting cycle was ending. So we were not able to make a presentation then. But the report has methodology, which I briefly explained to you just a little bit ago. It also talks about findings. Some of the findings have to do with data, and Kirsten King worked with her staff to provide West Ed all the data that they needed for demographics for last year. It talks about the results of the classroom observations and the student shadowing. There's a description about how we are identifying and placing our newcomer students, the quality of our curriculum, of our textbooks, the kinds of service we are providing to various subgroups. Historically at Eastside, we have talked about short-term and long-term English learners. And as part of this process, we had to disaggregate that group even a little bit more. We're talking about newcomers, recent arrivals from other countries who are learning English, who are learning to say, my name is, to student, and disaggregating that group of students even a little bit more, because we have students who are coming from other countries with interrupted education because of whatever the situation in their home country was. And then we have those students who come with high academic background. So there is a difference between them. They're just, a newcomer doesn't mean that they're all the same. We also had to disaggregate between them and our long-term English learners, students who have been here for 5, 6 years or more. And lastly, our students with disabilities who are English learners. They reviewed our assessment and monitoring systems, as well as what are those pathways we have created to support our English learners towards, to guide them towards post-secondary options, especially career and college and career. And lastly, the results of the focus group. So we have the report that outlines all the findings, but today I'm here to talk to you about the recommendations. So there are 9 recommendations for improvement in the way that we serve our English learners. The first one is they found, and we kind of knew this, that we only had ELD, English Language Development programs, at 5 of our schools. So that if I enroll at another school and there is no ELD program, then the student has to travel to a nearby high school that has the program. And if we're discussing the equitable community statement, that we should be serving students in their own community, that we should have a full array of services for our English learners in their own community and not place the burden of transportation on families and their students. That we enhance our professional development to our students so that we can support high quality instruction and create equitable programs across our district. And I just saw a typo right there on number 3, that we select appropriate curriculum for our English language development 1, 2, and 3 courses. And that we start aligning our courses to the English language English language proficiency assessment from the state of California that our ELs have to take every year to determine whether or not they are English proficient. That we adopt rigorous curriculum for English 1, 2, and 3, so that students are not just concentrating on English reading and writing, but that we start working towards developing oral proficiency, because there are English students, English learner students in all those courses who need to develop their English language, their oral proficiency. That we find a pathway to accelerate newcomer students towards their English language proficiency, and so that they can then meet those A through G requirements that will open up the path towards universities. Next slide. That we need to develop a specialized intake program for our newcomers when they first step into a school, to welcome them as they are, to find out their strengths and areas of growth, because they come with a story. Some of these students get on a plane and get here. Other students get here by walking. Other students come here quickly on a plane with a family, but there are a multitude of our students who come here via different means. Not only that, newcomer students leave behind family, school, friends, country, and they need to assimilate into our schools. And so what are those services we provide? We'll be working with student services and our social workers, SAC, and community organizations that can help us provide services to our newcomers. Recommendation number 7, that we need to develop some assessments to determine whether or not our students are meeting whatever standards we create for each of the courses, each of the levels. That we find a way to improve our designated ELD for our long-term ELs, so that we can accelerate their proficiency in English. So it would require some reworking of the course. And lastly, that we establish an Office of English and Multilingual Learner Services with qualified staff, so that we can then implement all the recommendations from the California EL roadmap, as well as the framework, the EL framework and the ELD standards. So a quick little update. We received this in June. We read it quickly, and we got to work right away. So we started addressing some of these recommendations over the summer with the help of Kirsten King and her staff, as well as our teacher on special assignment. We created a different EL placement test for the newcomers that arrived, so that it is more aligned to what we need to be doing. We know that this is an interim placement assessment because there's a lot more work that needs to be done. We also, Kirsten looked up the data of the schools that did not have an ELD program, and how many students did they get last year that were newcomers and they sent to other schools. And it turned out that at both James Lake High School and Oak Grove, enough students had moved into the neighborhood and were sent to Andrew Hills High School or Independence or YB, that they could have had their own ELD program. So this year, working with Mr. Huynh and Ms. Marquez, we created, and the principals at the schools, we started new ELD programs at both of those schools. And for recommendation number 2 of ensuring we have qualified personnel, we were able to hire a 0.4 subject area coordinator for ELD, a position that we had not had for a number of years, so that they can help support the work that we will be engaged in this coming year. Last board meeting, our superintendent, associate superintendent Marquez made a presentation around the LCAP. And you may remember that part of her presentation outlined the initiatives and priorities we would be engaged in this year as Ed Services. And our work around improving the outcomes for our English learners was one of those items that she mentioned and are part of our LCAP. 2 weeks ago, when she was here, she talked about the work of improving our services to English learners within the framework of our MTSS implementation. And that is addressing the whole child, addressing our English learners, their academic, behavioral, and wellness needs. And it talks about some of the metrics and some of the work that will be engaged in there. Slide. So our plan for this year is we're going to enter into a contract with WestEd. It will come up to one of the next board meetings so they can help us guide some of the work. We will start by looking at the curriculum and the course, the ELD courses, and also our textbooks, and start with providing some professional development to our teachers and to our district administrators, including me, and our site administrators. And all of this is so that we can then meet that goal of developing a vision for what high quality instruction is for our English learners. And we can create that tier 1 instruction for them with all supports embedded. So that is what we will be working on this year.
Wow. Quite a report.
Thank you. Any
Um,
questions?
Yes, Member Cortez.
I have a really down to earth kind of question. So talking about textbooks for ELD students, I mean, given how many students come from, how many our students come from so many different places, what does a textbook look like for an ELD student?
Especially for ELD 1, what we're looking for is a textbook that in some way mirrors what a world languages textbook looks like. We're talking at that level, at level 1 for language. We're talking about language acquisition. You need to learn the names of things. You need to learn key phrases, and then maybe verbs, and then more complex sentences. But how do we do that and accelerate it? The difference between a world languages class, especially at that level, and an ELD 1 class is that our students are basically in an immersion experience. It's not like learning a Spanish for somebody who doesn't speak it, and then you only do it 1 hour a week, 1 hour a day, 5 hours a week. Our ELs are especially our newcomers are in an immersive experience. So it's a combination of language acquisition, but at the same time meeting the ELD standards, which are aligned with our English language arts standards, because the goal is to get them there. There are textbooks out there, and there are vendors and publishers who have them, and that's what we'll be looking at. So part of the professional development will be for our district team, which will be made up of our ELD, some of our ELD department chairs, our SAC, me, our English SAC. It will be learning what are those that criteria we need to be looking at, calling publishers, making sure that they send us copies, reviewing that, and eventually following the process set by our instructional policies committee to adopt textbooks, pilot and adopt textbooks.
Any other comments, members? Oh, yes, Member Lay.
Yes.
Yes, this very, very comprehensive. I know that staff put a lot of time for English learners project. My question to you is, you mentioned on the graduation rate for Eastside Union High School District, overall graduation rate is 86.4%, but for English learners, 72.3%. Yeah, October 7, yes. Do we anticipate any prevention or any support for the English learners so they can keep up? Because I know that English is not the first language, and they can have to go through a lot of social emotional before they leave their family or their country and their friends. And I was wondering that if they did not finish or graduated, would they have enough, I mean, one more year, just like, they attend Foothill? Because I've been there and I know how hard it is. And so I can feel that, those English learners, student have struggle. They try to compete, but they don't know how, or maybe, they couldn't catch up with other students on, but they feel inferior if you put them on the level of the other student. So could you help me explain that, and how can we prevent, or how can we support them?
There's short-term support, and there's after the fact support, and then there is proactive support. And I think currently, if a student does not graduate, they can return for a fifth year. English learners, and actually our students can return for a fifth year, all our students, because we want to, especially with COVID and everything that's going on, we're happy to have them to return. We have some opportunities for credit recovery, whether it is through cyber highs, summer school. So those opportunities are there, but they tend to be after the fact, right? So what we're trying to do as part of the study is make sure that we don't get to that point, that if we restructure the way we teach, the way we organize our courses, the materials that we use, that we provide a pathway to accelerate by providing them not just help in an English class, but also that designated ELD class that they need, that in their English, math, science, social studies class, they are receiving integrated ELD services, that eventually our results will change. So those are more before things happen, preventative along the way, being more proactive as opposed to reactive after we have seen that. The tutoring, the makeup classes, we have those available. The problem is by the time students get there, you're right, some of them feel defeated. I've already failed these classes. I'm already now graduating. I'm just going to go to work. And some of them don't come back. So the point is getting to it beforehand while we still have them, while they're freshmen or sophomores or juniors and seniors. And that's changing the way we work.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100% about it. And my questions for you is, now you recommend the board to, instead of those English learner to go to the other school, if we can provide the home school, but if we have enough students to form a classroom for them to stay in their home school, rather than they have to travel to the other site.
So I believe this has been a conversation that after the report came, Ms. Marquez and SUPS Council has had. And there's a commitment for us to be able to serve our students in their own home, in their own homeschool and in their community.
But you're gonna spread too thin anyway, right? From a special development, teachers, and I think that's gonna be something is really good.
Yes.
I think as I like to see, the data, how many students, how many ESL, how many English learners, the ELD student that from each side, and looking to, do we give them some opportunities that maybe, we can accelerate them in a different ways, because not one size fit all, right?
That's right.
Because some students might not really stay in their home school, and they're doing well when they working with other students in the same capacity, right? So I think as I really like to learn a little bit more and do a little bit more study in order to support, because this is a subject that's really dear to my heart, because I've been there, done that, and I know how they feel. And I'm really glad that the superintendent, as well as staff, and associate superintendent Teresa Marquez and you, Marguerite, to really take time, and staff to take it, this level to another level, and look abroad to the whole content, how we can support the ELD. Thank you.
As soon as the contract is written up and is approved by the board, and we start engaging in that work, I don't know how board rules work, but if it's possible for you to join us here and there at some of our meetings, MPD, you're more than welcome.
All right, thank you.
Member Doe.
Thank you very much for your presentations. If you can scroll back, Superintendent Z to the very top, October 7th of 2021. There you go. Can you help me understand why you choose October of 21 last year instead of a multi-year so that we can see the trend and so we can have an understanding of where direction we're heading?
So the reason it says October 7, 2021 is because that was the date that I came to do the presentation. And that was the data that I shared with you, but it was only 1920 data because we didn't have a lot of COVID kind of impacted everything we did. And so we were in the mid 2021 was, we didn't have data for 2021. It was our distance learning year. So we were using 1920 data at the beginning of the 21-22 school year when I came to present. So the reason I put it up there as October 7th is my hope was to refresh your memory of what happened a year ago. I didn't expect you to remember everything that I covered and the reason why we went into the study. But there should be new data coming. I know Kristen King is working on that, and pretty soon you will have a presentation with more updated data. So that was part of the conversation when we did the study, when Wested asked for data. We couldn't provide them 2021 data like they asked because that was unreliable data. Not only did not all students took the LPAC for proficiency testing because they were doing it from home. Not everybody took the SBAC because they were doing it from home. So we went back a year and I can share the entire report. It is my understanding, if I remember correctly, that we decided to go back to pre-COVID. What was our trend then? Because 1920 and 2021 were not so reliable. So that information is there. Yes.
And then we can have potential recommendations of how to address and improve on our data.
Yes, and I believe that is available. So we'd be happy to share that with you. I'll share it with the superintendent.
Yeah, we can provide the report to you all, and that will show you the trend analysis, because they did conduct a trend analysis as part of, or the year-to-year data analysis as part of this overall review of the issues. And like I said, understanding that some of these more recent years are a little bit, there's different learnings, right? But looking at what had occurred prior year, and also with some notion, I believe that there was some discussion of, since we went to hubs versus everybody staying at their own school, in terms of what's proving to be more effective, or what's more recommended, just in terms of what students, families, and our data is showing us. But we'll get you that report.
Plus the other thing was with AB 104, Assembly Bill AB 104, our graduation data for last year is different for 2021 and 2022 because students who were affected by COVID, like juniors, students who were juniors juniors and seniors during the pandemic could graduate under state requirements, which is 130 credits. So that also forced us to go back to prior to the pandemic to look at those numbers, because technically this is 1920 data, which is the last year before the pandemic. This was the good old days prior to the pandemic, right? And this is what we had as the data. So, but we can definitely provide the analysis you request.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
President Jones.
Super appreciative, everything connecting the dots, the details. We can go to slide 20 on the recommendations. I think about all these recommendations. I'm like, yes, comprehensive, from like high level systems, policy, practices, you name it. But then I ask myself the question of how do we make sure it continues? We have a lot of work, and that's not that slide. One below. Oh, it's the recommendation number 9. Establish an office. What I heard that we added some capacity, but not necessarily an office. And so I'm curious to know, what are we doing in terms of heading in that direction sooner rather than later? Because we're also investing in continuing with WestEd, and we're doing a number of these things, but who is holding it together?
So this is one of my major projects this year. Although I'm not an office of English learner services, like board member Lay mentioned, this is a passion project for me. As a family, I come from a family of English learners, and this is me. We're talking about me and my brothers and my sister. So I'm the one that's coordinating it along with our subject area coordinator. Our subject area coordinator has a rich experience. He was an ELD teacher, he was an English teacher, and he was a world languages teacher. So he brings the language acquisition lens, the ELD lens, and the English proficiency lens. So with him and our subject area coordinators, we are starting this work. We're at the beginning stages of the work. We don't have a full-blown program, but the process of choosing a textbook and rewriting course descriptions, that's work that we do in instructional services all the time, whether the course is math or social studies. We're familiar with that work. We can engage in that. I also want to make sure that our subject area coordinators, all of them, English, math, science, social studies, world languages, are part of the process, because our English learners are our students, all of our students, they belong to all of us. So we're starting the work as instructional services. This is the work that we do. Just like we should be serving our students with disabilities, instructional services should serve them. At some point, and that's a decision beyond me, decisions may have to be made, but for now, we're taking it on as instructional services, and all members in the department, subject area coordinators, teachers on special assignment, and actually for some of this work, even the other directors will be part of that work.
That's helpful. I'd be interested in seeing the progress of that, because there is a lot of work in the department. And that's a very clear recommendation. So I would want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, whichever way we decide to move forward. I think it's important for us to have something that holds it all together, like just very dedicated to this. Especially again, if we're going to be investing more monies with WestEd, for example, and start other initiatives. So that's just something I would want to, put on the record that we need to keep our eye on.
Okay. Really appreciate your presentation tonight. And if there's no further board comment, we're going to proceed on the agenda.
Could I take the time to thank the work of Ed Services, and it's tremendous, and the lens that they take and their approach is so comprehensive, and the way that they went out across our system to interview people and find out what's there, to look at a multi-year lens, it's truly appreciated. But as we say, we're starting work, and we'll be about it. So thank you. And Martha, thank you for presenting tonight as well. The planning and the passion, everything comes through, and our learners are the better for it. Thank you.
I should mention that this is an area of great interest to me as well. Spanish was my first language. I'm the eldest and was the first one into the public school system, and they weren't ready for us back in the last century. There was no help. I was lost. I actually dropped out of kindergarten. I was so lost that I just didn't go back. They didn't come looking for me. I didn't come back until the first grade. I don't know how I did it even then. I was holding on to the arm of one of my neighbors, Joby, Jobe Flores, because he understood English and Spanish. I was telling him in Spanish, you got to tell me what's going on. But we're really meeting, the challenge as we should, but it wasn't always like that. So, thank you so much for all your efforts. Moving on, item section 13.01, approved contracts for services over 25,000.
Move to approve.
Moved by Cortese, seconded by Doe. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. 13.02, resolution establishing appropriations for the GAN spending limit. Do we need any comment on this?
Move approval.
End of annual thing.
Excuse me?
It's just a standard
Yeah, okay,
annual.
we need a
Yeah.
motion.
thing.
Move up approval.
Moved by member Lay, seconded by member Doe. There's no discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, abstention, passes unanimously. Nothing under section 14, human resources. The item for section 15, again, nothing there. Facilities bond operational items.
We're now to the point of consent.
Consent.
Now the consent calendar.
To adopt the consent calendar?
Second.
Moved by Cortese, seconded by Chavez to adopt the consent calendar. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. On to item 20, section 21, written reports, recommendations. We don't have any, oh, we have one, 21.02, receive quarterly report on the County of Santa Clara Treasury Investment Portfolio as of June 30, 2022, and this is merely received by the board officially and so noted in the minutes of the board. Section 22, future agenda items. 22.01, opportunity for the board to request items on future agendas. Pause, and if I hear nothing.
I'd like to request the staff, if you can't provide a report for the different ethnic group that enter into this program, ELD. And I like to see, you know, when you break it down to different school site, you know, how are we gonna make that progress? And will we support, you know, our ELD, you know, maybe looking to like 1 year to the next year, which progress that we have made and which one that we can continue to revise it or make change it. I like to see that report probably next year, but at least something to start with. Thank you.
The last all of a sudden. That was 22.01, under 22.02, it's simply listing the items that we're tracking, and if no comments there. We're going to move on to section 23, comments by the board and superintendent. I'm going to start to my far left with comments from member Doe.
I finally have a comment, because it's usually never take at this moment. I have a privilege of attending in the independent high school recently, and I just want to take the moment to thank the administrations, both the districts and along with the safety team, their staff, and their classified employees for significantly improve the safety environment and the climate at independent high school. So thank you for doing that, and also thank you for a great opportunity for me to return to Indy to see a great rally. I haven't been to an Indy rally in 30 plus years. So it's great. I feel almost like being back in high school at Indy in 1990, 91. So thank you. And I also want to take a personal note to thank teachers, Mr. Larry Winterland, for giving me an Indy hat. I feel like I am an Indy again. So thank you very much. And cheers.
I heard dodgeball might have been involved. Dodgeball may have been involved.
There was a dodgeball involved. And so there is a high school kid who is very, very happy that he was able to knock out a board member and a principal in a single evening. So a single afternoon, excuse me.
Hey, Vice President Chavez.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for a short and sweet and clear budget presentation. Welcome. It was a great way to start with presentation. Thank you for a super comprehensive ELL presentation. I am really excited for what is to come. The recommendations are really rigorous, and I am confident that this is going to take our work to the next level. So thank you for taking the lead on that. And I don't know if y'all know, but tomorrow's Mexican Independence Day, el 16 de septiembre. So happy Mexican Independence Day to our Eastside community. And again, congratulations to our independence teacher, Guadalupe Alvarez, who got recognized, I want to say a week ago. What is time? Assembly member Alex Lee and I held an event where we recognize members of the community for this month. And Guadalupe Alvarez was our representative for Assembly District 25 in the East Side. So congratulations once again.
Good. Member Chavez, excuse me, Member Cortez.
I just wanted to update the board on the progress of the Student Governing Board. So we have a robust team returning, a small but robust team, I should say. And we swore in, how many members, Superintendent?
I want to say 12, but I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
so we did have a representation from about 7 schools. And there's a push now to appoint student members to fill the vacancies. And the plan is to have a student board rep at our next meeting.
Good. Member Lay.
First of all, I know that all board received an email from the organizing committee of the Moon Festival, and they really appreciate the presence of all the boards, as was Superintendent Glenn Van Der Zee and Associate Superintendent Michelle Hunton, sorry. And they also want to thank you, the Principal Mary Paulette, as well as the custodian, have been worked so hard for the YB and the Moon Festival. And they always want to say that they will come back and present the check after they finish their expense. So they will see them again. So, and I'm really glad that this time that the younger generation step up, and one is alumni for independence, Jenny Dangan, and the other one is senior from Santa Teresa Shiva Farm that took the opportunity to co-coordinate for the event, and I'm really proud of them. And especially they have like over 80 volunteers for the YB Moon Festival, and they have a lot of VSA performance, and they did such a great job. I'm so proud of them. I'm also on the board of Work to Future, and I already sent a flyer, Career Expo, to superintendent to distribute it to all district to see any of our students may interested to join the Career Expo to look for a job. I think it's very important. As I believe it's on September 23rd on Friday. I already suggest with the board that sometime if they can provide another day instead of a work day, maybe on a weekend. So maybe some student and other interested adult out there that they're looking for a job, so they can come and join the Career Expo rather than take the time off on their, working time. And I also want to say that I want to thank you, Teacher Joanna Shea, who sent an email about a API educators network meeting for county office. And I look forward to hearing the staff from the ethnic study representative in fall. This is very interesting that I know that I've been involved such a long time on the ethnic study. So looking forward to hear the plan from our staff, and we continue to work and implement for our curriculum. That's all I have. I'm thanking. Happy Independence Days tomorrow to, for your event, Vice President Lorena Chavez. Thank you.
Great, I'll make a brief comment. One is attending the Moon Festival was quite an experience for me. Member Lay has been inviting me every year, and every year I've had a irreconcilable conflict. I just couldn't. So that was my first time this year to attend the Moon Festival, and it's quite an experience. Last night, the Metro Ed Board met for the first time in person since the pandemic began 2.5 years ago. So it was an occasion for us to be in each other's physical presence again. And, it's a board that works hard, is really passionate about the services offered at Metro Ed. And the superintendent there will be appearing before our board in the very near future for an update. So that concludes my remarks. Moving on to Mr. Superintendent.
Well, board member Chavez or Vice President Chavez mentioned that tomorrow's Mexican Heritage Day, but there's the thing called El Grito. And the grito happens at 11 o'clock on September 15th. And the president goes out and says, Viva, and reminding the entire country of when Father Miguel Hidalgo Morelos made the call for people to claim what is theirs and to make good with life, and for us to remember that. And I don't want to get too cheesy. I just want to remind us all about the Spartan Eastside Promise. And I want to go Viva Spartan Eastside Promise. This is available to us. Let's claim it. Let's make good and turn that promise into practice. And we'll build a budget that supports it. And we're going to develop programs specific for each of our learners to have that chance. And I like being able to walk around schools these days and have people mention it. It means it's getting around. It's good to hear our students talking about it. I ran into a student the other day and go, you know about the promise? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, all right, that's all I needed to hear. Yeah, absolutely. Good. We're doing work. Thank you all.
Thank you. Item 23.04, any comments on board meeting evaluation?
Sweet.
Size, comprehensive, meaningful, short and sweet, or something like that. Okay, that sounds like a very satisfactory evaluation. Moving on to.
Mr. Pardo did ask for 7:30 though. So 7 minutes.
Okay, we're
7
within
minutes past
striking
that.
distance.
This will mark on that. but-
24.01, is there any legal counsel report?
There are no actions from closed session to report.
Okay, folks, we're at the point of adjournment at 7:40 PM. Meeting adjourned.